Good morning, church family. I want to extend the welcome again to our visitors and some familiar faces we're getting to see in the audience. It's always great to be here. I'm going to reiterate what Jay said about the classrooms real quick because Alicia told me so, and I am got to do what she tells me. Alicia and I work a lot together in the children's ministry. We just started a new trimester. We're doing Kings and Prophets, and just like Jay said, if you have not been up there, in fact, even if you went up there last week, go up again this week. The amount of love and attention and detail that went into those classrooms is out of this world. It's really cool to see. Younger kids got new binders, new folders, take them home, bring them back. Parents, there's a note in there to you. Read it, be involved, take an active part in your kids' learning the Bible. Kids love the question, what'd you learn in Bible class today? Especially when they know the answer or when they're excited to tell you about it. And if you don't ask that question, you might be missing out on that. So, like you've heard, today is camp week. And I, like Jay, have the fondest of memories of camp. Beckett's very excited to go to camp. And I'm a parent now who has a kid that goes to camp, and I actually get to go to camp for the first time since I was a camper. Apparently, it's been long enough that they've forgotten all of the things I used to do there. But I'm very excited. I have all these great memories of camp, and believe it or not, my parents love sending me to camp. I know that's probably a shock too. But at the same time, you'd probably be surprised to know that my parents actually enjoyed when I came back from camp. Because I went up to camp this angsty, sarcastic, annoying, more so than I am now, like way worse as a teenager. And I would come back from this week at camp in a better mood, fired up for God, wanting to serve, as my mom would say, just better to be around. And so I thought about, okay, let's talk about mountaintops and being fired up for God. But then I realized, you know what, you guys haven't been to camp yet this week. You're not there yet. So let's instead talk about the wilderness. Let's talk about the times when we're not on the mountaintop, when we're not on fire, when we are finding our way through those harder times. And so to start, we're going to define wilderness. The physical description of a wilderness, some places that's lonely, it's dangerous, it's uncultivated, it's desolate. There's no shade, there's no trees, there's no fresh water, no sustenance. It's awful. Bakersfield. That's what I think of. Bakersfield's worse. No one's driving through and being like, hey, let's pull off and stop here in Bakersfield. Why people choose to live there? I don't know. But that's what I think of. It's a wilderness. It's a modern-day wilderness. But that's not what we're talking about, really. We're going to be talking about the spiritual wildernesses. And these are kind of similar in that loneliness, but they're also times of uncertainty. There are times of temptations and trials, and just plain and simple spiritual dryness. When people describe the times we live in, like the most common phrase that I hear is we live in uncertain times. These are the times. We are in a spiritual wilderness for a lot of the world, not just us personally, but the world. But your wilderness doesn't have to be huge picture. It doesn't have to be this long, lifelong thing. We could be talking your Monday through Saturday wilderness, your daily wildernesses that are filled with temptations and filled with trials and can be filled with that dryness that I'm not as enthusiastic as I was on Sunday or when I was involved and I was following God's plan. I'm getting dried up. And so the very first examples we get of kind of God and leading in the wilderness, and probably the most well-known, is the Israelites. And in Exodus 13, 17 through 18, we start to see this. And you can follow along in your Bibles, or I have the scripture up on the screen. In Exodus 13, 17, and 18, when Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them on the road through the Philistine country, though that was shorter. For God said, if they face war, they might change their minds and return to Egypt. So God led the people around by the desert road toward the Red Sea. I found this interesting. A lot of times when we feel like we end up in the wilderness and we're struggling through the wilderness, maybe we don't always realize that it's God that led us there. You see this very clearly. God led them to the wilderness. They didn't sin and then go to the wilderness and wander. God had already led them into the desert, into the wilderness. He had a plan, and he very directly, physically led them. Further down in Exodus, just a few verses, we read, "By day the Lord went ahead of them in a pillar of cloud to guide them on their way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, so that they could travel by day or night." That's convenient. "Neither the pillar of cloud by day nor the pillar of fire by night left its place in front of the people." This first example we get of life in the wilderness, God is physically leading them, and he even physically sustains them. Well, that's probably not going to be how your life goes. If you are following a pillar of fire, it's probably a wildfire, and you need to be careful. That's dangerous. But you're not going to get these direct God-involved things, but you're going to get these pushes, these nudges, these heart tugs, that little voice in the back of your head where you start to, when you're in those hard, lonely times, those temptations and trials. And I want to talk about ways that we can handle ourselves and deal with the wilderness. And first, we need to be trusting in God. God is faithful. God's always faithful to those who are faithful to him. When the Israelites were in the wilderness, they might have gotten there pretty quick. But what did they do? They stopped trusting in God. They stopped being faithful. And so they were out there for a long old time. And we need to be aware that even in the wilderness, it's a disorienting place. It is filled with hardships. Our faith in God is our starting point in how we get through those times, because you are going to go through those times. I would love to tell you that, hey, maybe one day you won't have these temptations and trials. You'll just be walking through life and it's great. Everything's smooth and easy, but that's not really going to be the case. We're going to have these moments in our lives that we come across. And so I think that it's good for us to go to one of the best sources of knowledge when it comes to praising God, faithfully following God in the wilderness. And we're at a psalm by David, not me, the other David, King David, I guess we'll call him. I'll be the other David. And this psalm he wrote while King Saul is chasing him through the wilderness. And so not only is he dealing in a physical wilderness, he's also in a sort of spiritual wilderness where the uncertainties of his life have got to be troubling for him. The trials and temptations, the temptation to kill Saul when he was able to sneak in and have a spear right over him, and he didn't do it. He is a great example for us to read, and he so wonderfully has preserved his thoughts here. And we read in Psalm 61, "You, God, are my God. Earnestly I seek you. I thirst for you. My whole being longs for you in a dry and parched land where there is no water." David really is just such a fantastic source for this. Here's the classic one. You hear this read at funerals. You hear this read all the time when people go through hardships. Psalms 23, 1 through 4. "The Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me." He is king. He's been made king, but he knows wandering through the wilderness, it's God who leads him. He has the utmost faith in God as his point of contact, a point to follow. And so when we're in that wilderness, we're faithful, we need to start seeking God. At all points, we need to start seeking God. And step one in this, we have to pray. Pray in the morning, pray when you go to bed, Pray with your family, pray with your friends, pray before you get up to do a sermon, pray before you become a counselor at camp. Pray. Pray, pray, pray. That is step one. Pray. You are in a wilderness, lost. Pray. When you are spiritually dry, step one, I want to be more enthusiastic. Pray. Did I hit that point hard enough? Can we move on? Pray. Once you pray, you have to listen. If you ask God for an answer, if you ask God for a path, shut up and listen. Open your eyes and look for what God is trying to tell you. You'll miss it. The world is busy. The world is loud. The world is hard. Being a parent is hard. Being a young person in this world is hard. Being a retired grandparent is super easy. It's, I don't know, Bob. The world is hard at all times. We have to be listening, our ears open, our eyes willing to take whatever it is God has planned for you. And then the hard part is to then follow it. You have to follow his lead. I don't know how much you guys are like me, but some of the worst feelings I have are when I go, man, I should tell this person about Jesus. I should invite this person to church and invite them to a Bible study. Let's figure that out. And I don't do it. And then I look back and I just go, ugh. It's an awful feeling. And there are other moments where I feel like, man, I could have done something more here and done something more. We can't go back. God showed you a path. He spoke to you while you were in the wilderness, and you did not follow, and you wandered. And then guess what? You're in the wilderness longer. You're in those lonely, hard trials and temptations longer. Matthew 10:27, Jesus is speaking here, and he says, "My sheep listen to my voice. I know them, and they follow me." I love that. I know them, and they follow me. Jesus went into the wilderness. He actually willingly went into the wilderness and dealt with all the trials and temptations alone. And he came out perfect. There's your example. Proverbs 3:5-7. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight. When we're faithful to God, when we're trusting in him, there will be some, I don't know what your plan is here, God. I have no idea what your plan is. I feel like this is where you're pulling me. I'm going to go. I'm going to start heading down here. I don't know why sometimes. We're going to do that. That has been our 4 years with Sawyer. We don't know why, but we're doing it. We don't understand. We trust you, God. And then straight paths. I will say this. We went camping over Memorial Day weekend, and a few days before, I got an email that said, leading a hike to a waterfall, David Scott. And I went, oh, okay. Well, I went on this hike last year, this one hike. I'm sure I could figure it out. Not that bad. We get there, and Nick so lovingly went with me beforehand to try to scope this place out and figure it out. Before, it was a straight shot. It was so easy to find. Well, the rain kind of changed things a little bit. The path looked not really the same, but still, there's no big trees. It's not hard. It didn't seem hard to get lost. We're hiking. We're going, and we go for like an hour and a half to a place that's supposed to take 30 minutes. And we go, well, maybe I guess we turn back. And we turn back. And then we come across these people who are equally lost, but acting like they know what they're talking about. Like, oh, yeah, the waterfall. Oh, sure, we saw it. It was over there. And I'm thinking, that's not where it was last year. That's weird. So we go do that. Nope, not the right one. And it was not a waterfall. It was a water running over a rock. We come back, and then we make this classic mistake. Maybe we didn't go far enough the first time. So we go back the way we came. And we've been hiking for 3.5 hours. I forgot to pack my hiking shoes, so I'm doing this in Vans slip-ons. I put on sunscreen. I took my hat off to put on all the sunscreen and forgot to put my hat back on. So by the time we're coming back, I'm crispy. I am like doing this. And all of a sudden, this family walks up out of this little path, covered in water, wearing towels, laughing, having this good time. And we're like, did you come from the waterfall? And they're like, yeah, are you guys okay? There's a big arrow. There's a big rock arrows right here. And we look down and we're like, oh yeah, there it is. Needless to say, we made it to the waterfall. But I tell you that story because straight paths that you know where you're supposed to be going and understanding are so much better than not knowing where you're supposed to be going. That's just true in general. Here you go. Here's a good example of that. Psalm 119, 105. Your word is a lamp for my feet, a light for my path. Once you get that path, once you find that thing, it's then time to lean on God's strength. Because you're not alone. You're going to be having those temptations and trials, and why you cannot bring the entire church with you to go like, you got this, man. Yeah, go talk to that guy about Jesus. You got this. You're not alone. God is with you. You are clothed in the life of Christ. He lives in your heart, and he sent a helper. The Spirit is with you. You're never alone. And then I love this. Did it go? His strength is made perfect in our weakness. I was listening to this podcast, and this guy said something super funny, but kind of profound in a way. He said the most comforting thing that he's ever been told is that when God was making a plan for him, he factored in his stupidity. And it's like, oh, that's kind of nice to think about. All my weaknesses, all my failings, all my shortcomings, all of your weaknesses, all of your failings, all of your shortcomings, God's already factored in to your plan. It's still on you to follow it, though. And I love this verse. This verse encompasses what we just talked about. Paul's writing here, verse 9. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in the weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties, in wildernesses. For when I am weak, then I am strong. I have enjoyed my deeper dives into my Bible studies and getting to learn a little bit more about some of the more nuanced things that you kind of miss just reading a general translation. And in Hebrew, this is super interesting to me. I love this stuff. Wilderness, the phrase is pronounced midbar, and here's how they wrote it. The phrase to speak or speaking to is called midbar, and they wrote it like this. When you're in the wilderness, God is speaking to you. That's the way it's supposed to be. We ask this question, when can I get out of the wilderness? And that's hard. Sometimes that's a hard question to ask. But maybe this is a better question. What can I get out of the wilderness? And so it's important to remember that your weaknesses become gifts when they drive you to depend on God. Your failings, your struggles become gifts from God when they drive you to depend on him. And just a second, Jay's going to get up here and we're going to lead one last song, and Mark will say a prayer and dismiss us. And we like to do the invitation. And the invitation is, of course, always for those who want to be baptized. Make it today. I'll be late to camp. I don't care. They can wait. But at the same time, the invitation is also for anybody who's in a wilderness right now and needs help getting out, needs that love and support. We'll pray with you. We'll spend time with you. It's important to us. So come, let's stand and sing.